Thank you for joining us again here at Electric Autonomy Canada. My name is Stephanie Walcraft, and today I'm joined by Matthew Price, General Manager of Uber Canada. Matthew's here to discuss with us Uber's plan to be emissions-free globally by 2040 and to have all rides be emissions-free within Canada by 2030, and to give us the details of the Canadian rollout of this plan. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks very much for having me, Stephanie.
This is very exciting progress for Uber Canada. Why set the 2030 goal specifically for Canada as one of the markets ahead of the rest of the world, and what's in it for Uber Canada in doing so?
So this very much for us starts with COVID-19, which for all of us has been a very challenging time. And I won't speak for you or your viewers necessarily, but at least for me, my friends, my family, it's just been a momentary pause in our lives, a second to reflect. And I think when we look out the window and look at our cities, they're kind of doing the same thing and getting a chance to breathe. So at Uber, one of the things we've been doing as a leadership team is asking ourselves, how do we take this as a moment to reset? And what can we do to help us build back better? And that's really the genesis of this. And as the largest mobility platform in the world, and certainly here in Canada, for us, we felt like this was our responsibility to use this unique moment in time to help our cities recover greener and cleaner. So the commitment we're making, 100% emissions free by 2040, is very much aligned with Canada's commitment to the Paris Climate Agreement. And I think the expectations that Canadians have of businesses like ours to do our part to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. But when we look at 2030 in particular, which is about getting to 100% emissions free in major cities that have supportive policies, we think that's a really important starting point, because we need to work with cities, we need to work with policymakers to get those policies in place to ensure that there is a path to that green future. And then one other thing I'd say is I'm also just thrilled that for Uber, this isn't just about making commitments, but it's met with, I think, a series of concrete actions that will get us there. Our Uber Green product, Uber Transit, the $800 million Clean Future program, and transparency along the way. And I'm happy to talk about all of that with you.
Fantastic. So you mentioned that $800 million investment, and maybe you could provide some detail on how much of that is earmarked for Canada and what sort of portions of the rollout we can expect to see benefit from Canada's portion of that expenditure.
So there's two key blockers to the adoption of electric vehicles in Canada as far as we're concerned, which is one, the cost and access to the vehicle, and two, the cost and access to the charging infrastructure. And the answer to this question, how much of the $800 million comes to Canada, is really dependent on how successful we are at bringing down those barriers to accelerate the transition of drivers to that zero emissions future. So that $800 million commitment, which we're calling the Clean Future program, it's a holistic program. It's valued at $800 million worldwide. And what it is it's inclusive of some existing, but many new initiatives to help drivers with that transition. And in Canada, the two key places that we're starting is a zero emissions incentive, which I can talk a bit about, which will both help to improve the earnings of drivers that are participating with us on the journey, but also bring down and in addition to that, a partnership with General Motors to actually bring down the cost of the vehicles, and very much a starting point. So to talk about the two of them separately, the zero emission incentive, the way that works is we've launched a product called Uber Green, which for riders is an option to request a hybrid or electric vehicle. And effectively, the riders will be charged a $1 surcharge, and that money is going to go directly into the driver's pocket, as well as into this fund. And this fund will then grow, and drivers can then kind of draw down on it to help them on the transition to electric vehicles.
That's really interesting. And I'm going to impart sort of a personal story here, because back when there was a lot of travel going on, I would use Uber and other ride-hailing services frequently to get back and forth to the airport. I recall one morning I was picked up by a Tesla, and I found that really interesting, a Model S, because you don't see that often on ride-hailing services. But in speaking with the driver, he was saying that already by using an electric vehicle in a ride-hailing service, he was gaining better profits from being part of the service than ICE vehicle drivers were, just from not having to pay for gasoline all the time and lower vehicle maintenance costs and that sort of thing. So Maybe you can help us balance that against how this additional incentive might help accelerate even further the transition toward zero emissions for the driver fleet within Uber.
Well, I think it's an important point because it's not like drivers on the road today on our platform aren't already in electric or hybrid vehicles. So we recently did some analysis that says if you look at Uber drivers today, they're 5 times as likely as your average car on the road to be in an electric or hybrid vehicle. So they found ways themselves to kind of fund and make the transition because economically for some of them it makes sense. The incentive then is only kind of an added catalyst to help us kind of move further along this journey.
We also spoke about the importance of driving government policy. How is it that Uber is expecting to work directly with federal and provincial governments to implement these changes? And where do you see opportunities in these areas for policies change to speed up the transition?
I mean, climate change is really a bit of a team sport. We know we cannot do this alone. And to be successful in getting and delivering the commitments we've made, we need to work with policymakers, we need to work with experts, we need to work with various third parties to fundamentally bring down the total cost of ownership of electric vehicles, to bring them on par with the internal combustion engine, which has had a generation worth of policies supporting its proliferation. I think it's important that the economic burden of moving towards an electric vehicle doesn't fall on the driver. And frankly, the fact that it falls on you and I as citizens is the reason there's not more of it in place today. In order to make the transition, we intend to work with governments, but we also intend to work with kind of leading experts, the World Resources Institute, Transport and Environment, EV Noir, et cetera. And I will say, fortunately here in Canada, we're lucky in that greenhouse gas emissions is a live issue in many levels of government, and government appears to be very open to kind of talk to us and work with us. One other thing I'll say, having been with Uber in Europe for a number of years, I think that the other thing Uber could bring to the table here, as a partner of cities and as a partner of government, are some great case studies and a lot of great data on how to do this well. As well as kind of insights on how exactly to drive the change. So one of the examples that we have in our recent European white paper called Spark, that's now available online, is the importance of differentiating between high utilization applications and private use. And by incentivizing the movement towards high utilization and commercial applications, what you actually do is you extend the benefits of EVs to people who can't necessarily afford or don't want their own electric vehicle, but they are willing to pay for a trip in an electric vehicle. And that really can help to catalyze the change.
Sure. And speaking on the charging side, what solutions is Uber considering in terms of ensuring that its drivers have access to affordable and accessible charging? And how might you be planning to work with charging network partners to implement that?
So going back to the 2 barriers to make the transition, and according to KPMG's recent study, charging is the #1 barrier standing in the way of adopting electric vehicles. And in some sense, it's the flywheel. It's the thing we need to lean into to get this to spin and to get this to work. And in Canada, we've seen growth and seen growth in recent years, but no doubt we need to see a lot more. And we do think this is one of the areas that governments need to lean in. This is also one of the areas that I think Uber can kind of partner with governments particularly effectively. The area that we're focused is both home and near home charging, both for low income drivers, but also the urban fast charging stations for drivers, transit, good delivery networks, et cetera. And again, looking back to Europe, I think there's a lot of great examples there of how Uber can collaborate with government and how Uber can collaborate with the private sector to make this happen. Uber and BP recently signed a deal in the UK that provide dedicated charging hubs to Uber drivers across London and a 50% discount to charge their electric vehicle. They have access to 7,000 charging points. In France, we have a partnership with EDF to provide rapid charging infrastructure along some of the main corridors. Again, discounts, but in this case, discounts for home charging installation. So I think there's a lot of ways to tackle this. We're just getting started, and I think it's important as Uber that we stand on our learnings globally, we bring them to Canada, and we engage in the dialogue with government and the private sector to work together to make this green future a reality.
You also mentioned the partnership with General Motors of Canada offering a discount on Chevrolet Bolt vehicles to Uber drivers as being a part of this partnership that you've established with them. We also reported at Electric Autonomy Canada that General Motors is in active discussions themselves with charging providers as part of their expansion leading up to the Lyric launch on the Cadillac brand. Are you looking to expand this into working with any other automakers, or would we consider this an exclusive deal?
So, I mean, I'll start off by saying we're super pleased to partner with General Motors Canada to bring this discount, about $3,000 off to Uber drivers immediately in Canada. But I think the important thing to say is this is our first partnership. And what we're going to need is a diverse set of partnerships that again, bring down the cost of vehicles and the cost of charging for drivers. And one of the benefits we have as Uber with our scale in Canada and globally is to partner with some of the biggest names in the game to make this happen. So much more to come here. This is very much a starting point, but again, super pleased to have the partnership in place with GM to get it started.
When you look ahead to the rollout of this program over the next, 1 to 5, 10 years, are there a percentage of zero emission rides that you're looking to hit as you ramp up this rollout, or is it more of an organic plan?
The commitments we've made to get to emission zero overall, I think are clear. 2030 in major cities with supportive policies, 2040 across all cities globally. But I will tell you, climate change is the pressing problem of our generation. And I'm relatively confident that what we're going to find here is a very popular product, that being Uber Green with Canadian riders. And ultimately, kind of the extent to which that product grows will be determined by how effective we are at bringing down the barriers we talked about to get drivers into electric vehicles. So, excited for the people in Toronto, Ottawa, Waterloo region, Vancouver to have access to Uber Green, and do anticipate a good reaction. We haven't talked about it, but I think the other product we brought to market as part of this, which we're really excited about, is something called journey planning, where you can now in your Uber app get access to public transit information to kind of help you plan the journey that's best for you, and for many Canadians, I think, help them plan a cleaner journey to get them to where they're going.
I'm sure you've read the opinion piece that was published on Electric Autonomy Canada that was advocating for a Canadian version of California's Clean Mile standard to encourage ride-hailing firms to reduce emissions on the way to transitioning to 100% ZEV. Can you share your thoughts on this position?
I think my response to it is I really believe both the commitments and the actions that we as Uber have made here in the past week are critical steps on that journey to zero emissions in Canada. We've talked a bit about Uber Green. We talked a bit about journey planning. There's other things here as well that we think will be very helpful on that journey. When it's safe to do so, we intend to relaunch our Uber Pool product, but do it in a different way where riders can request what we call nonstop shared rides to kind of really maximize the likelihood of getting more than one individual in the car. And the other thing is with the performance and transparency report that has been released here, I think it's really important that we are transparent and accountable in our actions. And I think that's going to be really important to helping to inform the debate and helping us work with policymakers, third-party organizations to figure out exactly where the focus areas need to be to accelerate us towards that 2030, 2040 outcome. So excited by the commitments and pleased that we're coupling it with actions.
Great. Is there anything else that in your view is important that we haven't discussed in regard to Uber's goal of being emissions free in Canada by 2030 and globally by 2040?
I think the thing I'd underscore is that we can't do this alone. And we need to and are excited to work with government, with policymakers, with experts, with other private sector organizations. And one thing we particularly haven't talked about here is the importance of micromobility, and the role that needs to play. Micromobility has been slow to come to Canada because of restrictive policies and regulation. And we strongly believe in the future of micromobility. Lime, we think, is an exceptionally effective operator in the cities they've been in, Calgary as the key Canadian one. And we're going to continue to advocate for that future because we think that is also a key component to provide people multiple modes to get from A to B, and again, ultimately help them choose the most efficient, but also the cleanest journey to get there.
Fantastic. This has been excellent. And thanks again for your insight and your time, Matthew. We appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Really, really appreciate you having me, and really appreciate all the work you do to help to tell this important story.
Matthew, thanks once again for sharing your insights with us today. And thanks to all of you for tuning in. Please don't forget to hit the bell to subscribe so you don't miss any more updates from Electric Autonomy Canada.